Welcome back to another great episode of your favorite podcast, Deac2Deac. On this episode, I had a chance to sit down with Wake Forest Hall of Famer and three-time academic All-American, Amy Perko. Amy and I talked about her stellar All-American basketball career at Wake Forest. Wake Forest celebrating 50 years of women's intercollegiate athletics, of course, her favorite Deacon moment, and much, much more. Take a listen, and as always, go Deacs. So let's go ahead and get started. So, Amy, where are you originally from, and what was it like growing up there?
I was originally from Kannapolis, North Carolina, and it's near Charlotte, kind of considered, almost, an extended suburb of Charlotte now. But Kannapolis was a small town. Went to A.L. Brown High School. And I grew up a Demon Deacon fan in Kannapolis. My dad played football at Wake Forest, so I grew up going to watch, Deacon football games, basketball games as a kid.
Now, how much of that influenced how you got involved in just sports initially?
Yeah, I always enjoyed sports from as early as I can remember. And but I also grew up in a time where um, Title IX, as I got into third grade, I think, Title IX passed in 1972. And I was really fortunate looking back on it now, but when I went to the fifth grade, our local YMCA had a basketball league for fifth and sixth grade girls to play in a basketball league. And looking back on it now, we were probably one of the first communities to have something like that. And it was, because the local YMCA director wanted to have girls programs just like they did for boys. My sister, older sister, tried out for the high school basketball team and came home. Parents put up a goal because she wanted to try out for the high school team. Had never had the opportunity to play basketball before high school, again, because they just, didn't have it. And so she taught me what she learned at her high school basketball tryout, which was how to shoot a layup. And I was in the third grade at the time. And so I went through the steps with her, and I was hooked from that moment on.
So all of this started from the having an older sibling, and look
Yeah.
what you've turned that layup into. That's it. It's amazing. So, and again, with your dad having played at Wake Forest and having that connection, what are some of the things that early in life that you may have just learned from interacting and coming to the games? What are some things you learned about Wake Forest early on with that connection through your dad?
Sure. Well, I've told this story before, but I like I said, after my sister taught me how to shoot a layup, I was hooked on basketball and spent countless hours in my driveway, shooting baskets and just learning, learning how to play the game. But Skip Brown was a star player at Wake Forest at the time. And so I can remember going to watch Wake Forest games. And then when I'd come home and practice on my driveway, my imaginary teammate was Skip, so we played a lot of successful games against Carolina on my driveway hoop. So, fast forward years later when I'm actually playing at Wake Forest, and we were there, I think it was like maybe summer camp, and we were all around, and in walks Skip Brown to play pickup games. So I actually got to play an actual game with Skip Brown as my teammate later on in life.
That's awesome. You talk about beating Carolina in your head. In my head, we've never lost to Carolina. I don't care what the scoreboard says. We've never lost. So you, again, you talk about not having a lot of opportunity early on in life to really develop as a basketball player. But what was the biggest difference, say, from when you first picked up the game through your sister's influence versus when you get to high school and you have a high school coach that has played an influential part in your life. How much growth was there in between that time period?
Oh, well, a lot, because as I mentioned, we were fortunate to have some leaders in our community who I was able to play 5th and 6th grade basketball, played in middle school, played in high school, and during all those years, our parents sent me to the Wake Forest. At that time, it was the Carl Tacey basketball camp. Went to the Ncaa basketball camp, went to the Campbell basketball camp. So, like I said, I was hooked on the game. Also played some other sports, tennis and softball, but basketball was my passion. And it was, I loved playing it. We didn't have, growing up at that time, we didn't have travel teams and AAU teams. Those really came about more like around my senior year in high school. So I never, was had that opportunity. But a lot of growth, and what I tell parents and young athletes, and have always shared, is you do have in today's world so much sports specialization early on, but I really think it's beneficial early on for athletes and kids to really play a lot of different sports, and you learn different things from each one. And I also played volleyball. I remember I had to choose between volleyball and tennis because they were the same sport. And I chose tennis. I enjoyed it. I also thought it helped me with my footwork in basketball. So, there are things that you pick up with a lot of different sports. So I just think that's, again, advice I share with young athletes is don't specialize too early.
And you brought that up, and that's one of the things I went through growing up. I played multiple sports, and I soon settled on football. But the things I learned from the other sports, not just staying in shape, but the skill set, the footwork, all of those were a benefit for football as well. Plus, it kept me out of trouble. It kept me out of trouble. So, when you talk about playing different sports, what was the thing that made you settle on basketball? What made you say, this is it?
Good question. I don't know. I loved the sport. I was good at it, so that probably had something to do with it. And I just loved everything about the sport. Like I said, I spent so much time on it was something I could do by myself as well, on my back, even on my driveway hoop, and just spend a lot of time doing that. Tennis, you need somebody else to play with, which, yeah. But I think that's, I just love the game, and have always loved the game.
So when you're in high school and you're playing and you're obviously having some success, what made you decide that Wake was going to be the place for you? Was it the connection through your dad, or what was it about Wake Forest as a place for you that really sold you on coming as a student athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I would say again, I was in high school in 1983 is when I graduated from high school. So again, we didn't have travel teams, the kind of recruiting atmosphere that young players experience today. And so, I maybe considered a couple other schools, but pretty early on, I knew, my older sisters actually at the time, one had just graduated from Wake Forest, another one was at Wake Forest. My two older sisters were there. I also received an academic scholarship early in this kind of college process, the Petite Scholarship, which is at Wake Forest. And so just knew early on, academically, athletically, Wake Forest was the place I wanted to be. I mentioned I went to the summer camps there, and in high school, I think it was, my junior year or sophomore year, Barbara Buchanan, one of the players on the team at Wake at the time, was working the camp, and I loved Barbara Buchanan. And And, at camp, we had an opportunity to play some pickup games, and I could just see myself there. So everything was a great fit. Wanda Briley was the head coach. Lori Bailey was the assistant coach, and had a real good relationship with them during the recruiting process.
So you get to Wake, and you've had all these connections to it, the camps, your father, your sisters. What was your freshman year, your experience like coming in, and now you're playing the sport at the highest level, and this is a new environment, even though you've had a connection, it's still new for you going through this. What was that freshman year like, and who were some of the people that helped you establish that strong foundation?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it was great because, again, I grew up dreaming of playing college basketball and dreaming of playing at Wake Forest. And so to actually have that become my reality was terrific. I'm very grateful for that. And, that's another thing about Wake Forest, is such a family atmosphere, smaller school playing at a big time level. And, I had great professors. As I mentioned, the assistant coach, Coach Bailey, during my freshman year, kind of really helping me get acclimated, not putting too much pressure on myself, was really important. And, the teammates, we had a strong senior class, my freshman year. And then, other teammates, Lisa Stockton was a year ahead of me, Janice Collins a year ahead of me, just, kind of that welcoming environment, made, and all the folks on the academic side as well. And then, I had a lot of friends outside of athletics. And so that was always helpful too, because you could have those friendships and away from kind of the team environment. And so I had some great friends as well. Freshman year that continued, that are great friends now, and have continued, throughout my life.
So you come in, and what was the program like at the time? Because you came in, I mean, you made an immediate impact. And well, where was the program, and what do you think some of the things were that helped you come in and make that impact that you did so early?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, and I'll give you the context, and it does make me sound older than I want to sound, but it is the reality. When I came in 1983 was my freshman year. I think this is right. Wake Forest had only begun to offer scholarships in women's sports about 3 years earlier. So, the NCAA, in fact, did not have the first women's basketball championship until 1981. Before that, it was under AIAW, the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. So the NCAA championship, had just started. And so the Wake Forest was putting more money into women's basketball and its other sports, offering scholarships. So that makes a big difference, clearly, when you've started to build a program. Of course, State and Maryland at that time were way ahead of Wake Forest in terms of the years they had been offering scholarships for women's basketball. So I think, that was a big difference, clearly, when that change was made. And in terms of being able to make an impact, I can remember my first game wearing myself out in the warm-ups, because I thought, I'm not going to see much time, so let me work up a sweat here in the warm-up. But it was a surprise to me that, I was able to contribute as much as I did, early on. And, again, that's a tribute to, my teammates as well, and the coaches for, giving me that opportunity.
You talk about wearing yourself out of warm-ups. I did the same thing. The first game I knew I was going to get a chance to play. I was so excited. I went through warm-ups, full tilt, ran out onto the field, full tilt, and I was dead tired by the time kickoff came. So I learned the same lesson my freshman year. So who was that team that in your career at Wake, in your time, that you just as a player really just got up for that game? I know every game is important, but who was that team? Which team was the one you just, for some reason, put that extra into it?
Oh, I don't, I think, naturally Carolina, you always got up for the Carolina game. Duke was another, and when I played as well, the ACC was smaller than it is now. Georgia Tech had just joined. They were the newest member. So, but to me, growing up watching ACC game of the week, that was when there was only one ACC game on per week.
Yep.
Growing up around ACC basketball, all the ACC games were big games in my view.
So growing up in ACC country, what was it like when you got the call that you were all ACC?
Yeah, that was that's a it's a recognition I never dreamed I would be able to accomplish, but it really speaks to the program, the support, the coaches, my teammates, and really the process, just believing and putting in, the hard work year after year to just try to improve and get better. So, again, I didn't, I didn't think, I'm going to go to Wake Forest and be all ACC. I said, I'm going to go to Wake Forest and I want to help Wake Forest win. And that's just, the way some of those recognitions worked out in terms of being able to accomplish that.
Now, I want to let Deacon Nation know. Now, it didn't stop at all ACC. Let me get to the next level. So, what was it like when you got the call about being an All-American multiple times, not just one call? What was that experience like to go from that layup that your sister taught you to you're one of the best in the country multiple times?
Well, it's, I was fortunate and again really grateful to be a three-time academic All-American, and COSIDA, the College Sports Information Directors of America, run that program. And Dick Enberg, folks I think know the name, a longtime sportscaster who passed away unfortunately a couple of years ago. But Dick Enberg was the spokesperson for the Academic All-America program. And he called the athletes to let them know they had been selected. And when I was inducted into the Academic All-America Hall of Fame about a decade ago, got a call again from Dick Enberg. And so that at that time they had a banquet, so Dick Enberg was there in person and we were invited to attend. So those are special memories of the opportunity, the recognition, and again, I was the fortunate one that was able to receive that, but it really speaks to the opportunities that I was given at Wake Forest and the support of the coaches and my teammates, and just tremendously grateful for that.
So we talked about earlier just the state of women's athletics in college and where it was and how there was some progress, but it was continue to grow. Mm-hmm. When you look back on it, this year, Wake Forest is celebrating 50 years of women's athletics. Kind of share your thoughts on when you look back and see where things were and where things are now. When you look at 50 years of women's athletics at Wake, kind of give your perspective on how much growth you've seen and what it was like to be a part of building that early foundation of so many wonderful athletes and coaches that came through that came through Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just Doc Casey was there when I was there, and she was the first women's athletics director. And again, just seeing the support that has grown through the years, and the excellence that's been achieved in so many sports. The golf program, the All-Americans, the field hockey national championships, and sports that have been added, like soccer was not there when I was there. So again, we've seen so much growth from me coming in a moment when Wake Forest was just beginning to give scholarships in women's sports, to now seeing the excellent facilities, the support all around. And when I was there as well, we were fortunate. We had great coaches, and all the sports had some great coaches, and the administrative support. Burt Woodard in sports information department was just tremendous in his attention to our program. The athletic training staff. So we had all those same, support across the board that the men's teams have. Certainly now you have, I guess more equity across the board in terms of modes of transportation, getting to competitions, things like that. But again, the opportunities that Wake Forest provided to all of us for, there's just the awesome academic experience and the opportunities in the ACC and in all our sports was just tremendous. And it's great to see how the program has grown and across the board here as we celebrate, 50 years. And again, really grateful to the leaders, Gene Hooks, Doc Casey, Ron Wellman, Diane Daly, Barbara Walker, Roxanne Moody, who was an assistant coach when I played and has been at Wake Forest and led the equipment staff and all their great support for athletes. So, across the board, you could go through so many names of folks who have been there for the majority of the 50 years as well. That speaks to kind of the continuity and the family atmosphere of Wake Forest.
I had a wonderful conversation with Coach Diane Daly here on the podcast. It was great. And I asked her this question, and I'm going to ask you, do you consider yourself a trailblazer when you look back at, again, where the state of things were for women's athletics, and you look at the work that you've done after your athletic career? How would you consider yourself a trailblazer?
That's a great question. In the past, I always considered, I would go to luncheons honoring the pioneers in women's sports, and it puts you in an age group maybe that you don't feel as comfortable with. But I certainly think that I've been fortunate to have been placed in positions where I can provide leadership for sports and for women's sports. And so I hope that, my goal is to always make the most of the opportunities I've been given. So I have been given a platform to help promote women's sports and to talk about the importance of equity across the board in sports. And that the purpose of college sports really is to develop human potential in young men and young women in the same way through sports. And so to be able to use the platform to be a leader that helps promote that, that's what I'm trying to make the most of those opportunities.
And speaking of leadership, I want to talk about your time after Wake. So after graduating, you started working for the NCAA and built a great professional career on that side of athletics. was that planned, or did that just sort of happen like most of us after college? You found a job to pay the bills, you had to eat, and it just worked out. So what was it? Was that a plan of yours the entire time?
I did. As I said, I've loved sports from my earliest, ages, and certainly I had a great experience at Wake Forest, and so I did want to go into administration in college sports. So that was my goal, and actually, a couple of people I'll point out that were really helpful to me, not only in terms of talking to Gene Hooks and others there at the university, but and it may have been Gene Hooks who recommended it. He said, "Why don't you talk to John LaCrone at the ACC office, who's he was a former Wake Forest golfer and administrator, and so John LaCrone gave me some advice as a fellow Deac, and John and I have been friends now since then, and he helped me, at the time, kind of see a path. Also, I had at some point worked the KL basketball camp, and Norlin Finch was the associate athletics director at NC State. Norlin Finch was the very first women's basketball coach at Wake Forest.
Oh,
And so
wow.
again, she helped point me in the right directions in terms of, what might be helpful to consider. So I just bring those up because, just the value of the Wake Forest network, and the value of just people want to help other people, and administrators in a certain industry want to help young college graduates and students who who want to pursue that path. So I'm grateful to those and many others who've helped mentor me, and at least provided some helpful advice that put me on this path.
Now, that path took you in a couple of different directions. In 2001, you were named team president of the NBA's development team, the Asheville Altitude. I'm sorry.
Actually, the Fayetteville Patriots was
The
my
Fayetteville
team.
Patriots. Oh,
Yeah.
Fayetteville. Oh, I'm from Lawrenceburg, North Carolina, right
Okay.
down the road there.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, to be a team president of a basketball team? What was that like?
Yeah. Really interesting. I had been working in college sports. I had been with the Ncaa, then had a great opportunity to work at University of Kansas as the associate AD. Was actually at Kansas when Coach Roy Williams, was the basketball coach at Kansas. And then was recruited by the NBA to serve as the team president. And at the time, the NBA was starting its men's minor league. And they put a specific emphasis on increasing the diversity of their front office positions. And so they specifically targeted women and minorities to recruit them to run these front office for their development league teams, because they were using the development league to develop not only the basketball talent, but the administrative talent, officiating, on down the line. So it was a great concept. And that was, David Stern's initiative. Now it's the G League. At the time, it was the D League, the NBA D League Development League, and it's celebrating its 20th year. And I bring that up because when we started and we were recruited to run these teams, the NBA really thought by year 2 they would be now where they are in year 20. So it was a great learning experience.
Oh, wow.
But also learned from that experience that my passion was in college sports and the education-based model, and that I didn't want to pursue that front office path for an NBA team. As much as I love basketball, that was my passion, was in college sports. So I kind of made that decision to get back into college sports administration instead of pursuing that, NBA front office path.
Now, you brought that up about sort of changing paths. In 2005, you joined the Night Commission. Mm-hmm. Talk about what that is and some of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, the Night Commission we're funded by the James the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. So we're an independent group, and our purpose is really to lead transformational change to prioritize athletes' education, health, safety, and success in college sports. So we're focused on designing and promoting policies and policy changes for the NCAA, conferences, schools to adopt, with that end goal to strengthen the educational model of college sports. So that was always, in sync with where my passion is. And when I worked at the NCAA, I got to see and work, with policy and how that impacts then campus, each individual campus, and then each individual athlete's experience. So one of the policies that we were working on when I started in 2005 were policies to help improve graduation rates across the board. At that time, particularly in football and men's basketball, the graduation rates lagged behind all the other sports. So we promoted a policy that teams should have to be on track to graduate at least half their players, at least 50%, to be eligible for postseason championships, bowl games. So the point being that universities should meet their academic obligations with their athletes first before they have that privilege of playing for a national championship. It took several years, but the NCAA adopted that policy in 2011. We also promoted a policy to change the NCAA's revenue distribution. The NCAA sends schools hundreds of millions of dollars every year through the monies generated by March Madness. And we promoted changing that distribution to incorporate academic incentives to reward schools for achieving the academic outcomes with athletes. And so again, that took longer than we would have liked, but it was adopted in 2016. So those are examples of two policies that we pushed, we initiated, we pushed, and the NCAA adopted it. And the ultimate result has been, to improve that athlete experience because of the incentives now that are built into the system around ensuring that priority is given to the academic experience.
So with your insight and your work with the Knight Commission, what would you say are some of the 2 or 3 of the emerging issues when it comes to college athletics and academics and safety and creating that balance and that great experience for the university and the student athlete? What are some of the emerging issues that are coming?
Well, there are a lot of issues currently that have emerged and that are continuing to emerge. I think the biggest, one is NIL compensation from third parties, not from the institution. And that is an initiative and a change that our commission did support. And we put forth some principles over a year ago to help guide how that would be allowed for college athletes, again, to allow athletes to have the same opportunity as every other college student to be able to earn some compensation based on the use of their name, image, likeness. The other side of, somewhat related to that, has been this question around, well, should college sports move to full-on institutional pay-for-play? Should institutions be able to be involved in NIL compensation and or just pay-for-play? And that's an area that in our commission's view is the wrong path for college sports, because it completely changes it from this education-based model to a pro sports model. And so there are a lot of policy issues currently in play. And in fact, Congress is looking at a number of potential proposed legislation as it relates to college sports. So the issues ahead for schools like Wake Forest, ACC, and others are, how can we best ensure that the growing revenues being generated by the popularity of college sports are being used to strengthen this educational model and direct more monies to athlete education, health, safety, and overall well-being.
Seems like there's a lot of policies having to that are developed impacting the revenue and the potential revenue. So with the name, image, and likeness, there are a lot of people that are still trying to figure out, what does that mean? Does that mean a player can get money from a booster? Does that mean like how much a player's getting? So much of that is kept under wraps in terms of the average fan does not know what is going on. There are questions about it. There are alums that want to know about it. Overall, can you sort of give us give Deacon Nation kind of a snapshot of what is the NIL and what was the purpose of it and how is it going so far?
Yeah, great question. NIL is the acronym for name, image, and likeness. And the purpose of it is, again, the intention was to allow athletes, just like any other college student, allow athletes to earn compensation from non-institutional sources based on the use of their name, image, likeness. So that an athlete with a huge social media following, as an example, who can then monetize that social media following just like any other college student, can endorse companies' products, again, without any institutional involvement. And so, again, that concept was to treat athletes, allow athletes to be treated just like any other college student. So in terms of how's it going, I think overall it's worked out very well for athletes who want to take advantage of those opportunities. The concern now, though, from a national policy standpoint, is that the way it was implemented, there are a number of I think now there are 40 states that have NIL specific laws. The states that don't have any NIL, any state law on NIL, just have to follow the institutions policy, or the Ncaa policy, which is institutions can't be involved in arranging NIL, and NIL deals can't be used as recruiting inducements. So again, the key being no institutional involvement. And so, that's the basic kind of outline of how NIL compensation is working. I think the majority of NIL compensation is happening through social media. So again, it's the emergence of social media that also put more pressure on this type of policy change. We were talking about this issue more than a decade ago when the Ncaa football video game was very popular, and technology had advanced so that those football players looked an awful lot like the actual football players. And so that led to a lawsuit that played out over a number of years. That was also a factor in moving forward with this particular policy change. So that's how it's going. Again, our own viewpoint is we think there needs to be uniformity. There needs to be national legislation so that, again, we're in a national, environment of competition. So you want to have, a more level playing field across all the states so that the athletes know what the rules are and that they don't differ by states. There's an important part of that uniformity push as well to really benefit athletes, because there's some state laws, as an example, that prohibit any athlete endorsement contract from extending beyond their college eligibility, which makes sense. And it's there to protect the athlete, because there are some, there's some companies that may want to know that this athlete may become a professional, and they would like to have that pro athlete then endorse their company, but that athlete's value as a college athlete would be less than what it is as a pro. So there's some state laws that already have that in place, so they're protecting the athletes, so to speak. But again, that's not uniform, and it there all of this. The other good point about NIL compensation is it is another form of education for athletes of learning how to operate in this entrepreneurial environment, and understanding how all these types of things work. But you want to do it in a way that protects the athlete and doesn't put them in situations where they're being exploited as well.
You want to talk about the popularity of the football video games in college. That's what we did. Fridays before games, you would find us piled into somebody's room playing PlayStation or whatever, and everybody played with themselves. You'll find yourself on the roster and adjust it. And I remember, I think it was the Ed O'Bannon was basketball player out of UCLA that was a part of a lawsuit kind of similar to that. Mm-hmm. So I want you to flash back a little bit for me. What was your favorite Deacon moment on the court and off the court?
Well, the favorite Deacon moment on the court is very easy. It was my junior year ACC tournament, and we had a really good team that year. Janice Collins, Lisa Stockton were seniors, and we were playing Duke. And Wake, at that point, we had never advanced past the first round of the ACC tournament. We were the underdog in the Duke game, and we ended up winning by 1 point on a last-second shot. And I was fortunate to be the person who hit the last-second shot. So again, all those years I played with Skip Brown on my driveway, we in my imaginary Deacon uniform, we actually pulled off some last-second wins. And so again, to be able to do that and experience that moment was unbelievable with our teammates, because our team played a great game and we pulled off the upset, and just celebrating that with my teammates was great. And then we went on the next night. The ACC was smaller then, so the next night we were in the semifinals against Carolina, and we played another great game. We unfortunately lost that one by 2 on kind of an opposite. They hit a shot there at the end that propelled them. So, but that was a great, ACC tournament for us, and certainly a great memory. And several years ago, I received a DVD in the mail out of the blue, and it was from my former Wake Forest coach, Joe Sanchez, and the DVD was just labeled "The Shot." And,
oh, wow.
So I had never really seen it until several years ago, and so I was able to watch the game and experience that again, which was a lot of fun. And I recently reconnected with teammates over, during the pandemic when everyone was shut down, and we had some reunion calls with teammates, and several said, "Does anybody have any DVDs?" Or some of them had never seen, footage of games. And so I actually, recorded a couple of segments and sent them around. And so that was a lot of fun sharing that with our teammates. Favorite Deacon moment off the court, Kevin, I would need more time to think about that, because there's just so many, from just, Wake Forest moments that are just special, even just with friends outside of athletics, and I think nothing beats a beautiful spring day walking around the quad at Wake Forest. Yeah. Maybe that, just, hanging out on the quad with friends on a beautiful spring day is another favorite Deacon moment.
I will tell you what, and people underestimate the impact of being on the quad in the fall watching the leaves turn,
Yeah.
especially as it gets dark, because leaving practice, that's when we left practice. That's when I walked the quad, was when everybody was gone and in the dorm rooms. But you're right, it's an amazing view on campus when you have a chance to come back and just take a walk. So Amy, before we go, what would be your advice to a younger current student athlete right now at Wake Forest that is balancing the academic expectations, the athletic expectations? What would be your advice to help them get through that process?
Hmm. I think it's enjoy the moment, and your college years go by fast. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, and be willing to ask for help. There's a lot of great people, at Wake Forest who are there to help students succeed. And so to be able to reach out to ask for help and to get that support, is important. And again, I think overall, just in being present, enjoying the moment, because it will go by fast. And also enjoying the relationships, because again, I have great relationships with my former teammates, former coaches, and those are the things that you remember. You don't remember all the games, but you remember the relationships and the people you experienced it with.
And that is so true. So you talked about Skip Brown and so many others. Who should be the next guest on Deac2Deac podcast? Who would you like to see?
Oh, I'll need to think about that too. I'll
I
send
thought it
you
was
a
going to
note
be an
on that.
automatic Skip Brown. I was going to pull up
Oh,
Skip's
I thought you'd already had Skip Brown, but if you hadn't had Skip Brown, you need to have Skip Brown. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Skip is still connected with Wake, still around. You can see him at some of the games, football, basketball, just the various sports.
Yeah.
So we
Number
let him.
15, right? Number 15.
I think that was his
I
number.
think,
I mean, he's all. You see some of those pictures from that time all around on campus. So Deacon Nation, you've heard it from Hall of Famer and All-American Amy Perko that we've got to get Skip Brown on here as a guest. Amy, thank you so much for taking the time out and sharing your story and talk about some of the things that you're working on and your experience. It's great to hear from you.
thanks, Kevin. Really enjoyed it. Go Deacs.
Go Deacs.